Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Linda.
I'm Charles.
I'm Seth.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Chris.
I'm Benito.
And we have Benito with us today again. Yay! So, today we are going to jump into the controversy over Wizards of the Coast's new OGL, original gaming license, and the update to that. And I guess everybody has a particular take on that. So I think Benito, was the first one to actually post about it in our Discord group. And Benito, how'd you come across the news?
Well, I don't think you could throw a dead cat without knowing about the news when it first hit. And I just happened to be online doing something, and it was just one thing after another, after another, after another. It was coming in so fast, and there was, I think, some confusion on what it was going to be about. And of course, immediately everybody thought the worst, and it kind of was. I think that first version that was leaked.
Yeah, right. On purpose.
Yeah, was not fantastic. And I don't know if they were dipping their toe in the water to really see what the reaction would be, or if it really was a leak. But yeah, and then it just exploded. Then, of course, we all got sucked into it, and everybody was making statements, and anybody that had a YouTube channel was talking about it. And I didn't see a whole lot of differences in what people were talking about. So at least everybody was fairly uniform on the discussion, but there was a lot out there. And so, I wanted to share with you guys. I don't remember that I was the first one, but maybe I was.
I think you were. I know the first time I saw it was from you, and I'm like, what the heck's going on with this? And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and at first I didn't think it would affect me at all, but then the more I thought about it and the more of the videos that I watched and the content, I started to realize how it really could start to affect, us as players.
Yeah. So I don't know, Chris or Seth, do one of you guys kind of want to give a summary of what it's all about?
Sure. Either one.
Yeah. Sorry, Seth.
Me,
Seth looks like the deer in the headlights. Like,
no, I was opening some reference tabs, and one of them started playing a video.
Oh, gotcha.
No, not now.
Okay. I'll start then. So what this is about was a document got leaked for the OGL, which is the Open Gaming License, which basically set the rules for how the content could be used that was created from Wizards of the Coast, particularly what they call the SRD, the Systems Reference Document, which is kind of the heart that defines everything that is D&D. And what happened is, so we'll call it OGL. I think it was like 1.0. There's now a 1.1 that was leaked and had some pretty critical changes, and the changes are in the tune of, from a 1 or 2 page OGL to now like a 15 plus page, OGL. So a lot has changed. The intent or the driving factor, according to Wizards of the Coast, was, the initial license was intended for a certain type of format, documents and things like that. It really wasn't built around a digital content age where you have a lot of different ways to produce things. Virtually or through other types of games, other physical items, things of that nature. So it's to catch them up with the times. However, in doing so, they really did change the tone in what people, you and I, are allowed to do, and more importantly, who owns that IP, if you will, that property when it's created. And so it got really kind of interesting what was released. Seth, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, so the OGL is really, or the original OGL, the 1.0A, has been really important to the Dungeons and Dragons community.
Hey, Seth,
And
can you move your mic any closer? You're a little bit faint.
that's not something most people accuse me of. Thank you.
That's better. Thank you.
So a lot. I have yet to read from a creator who hasn't credited the OGL with making as being the driving force that made the community what it is today.
The original one. The original one.
Yeah, the original one.
Yeah.
It was. It really. The original one was a kind of a remarkable thing for the time. It let other people, third parties, create content that played in Dungeons and Dragons campground. There were some limitations, like you could not use quite a bit of what's called licensed content. So things that are very specific to the D&D world or the world specifically. So you can make something that uses the system reference document, the SRD, and that just lays out rules, spell names, classes, that sort of stuff. It's just the kind of the bare bones of the game. So you can make something that uses that. You could not make something that, for instance, an official Eberron campaign. You can't do that, or you can't sell it.
So for those of you listening,
this is happening whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, has decided it's time to cuddle.
Is that a cat or a ham?
A little bit of both.
It is a potato.
A potato.
So yeah, the original open gaming license was huge, and it allowed for some things that Blizzard's probably didn't want, like Paizo. So Paizo, if anyone doesn't know, is the publisher of Pathfinder, and now they're into Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, Paizo got their start publishing D&D magazines and adventures for Wizards of the Coast. Then they fired them and changed the system to 4th edition and tried to, as well, move over to a new license. Paizo said no, and then they made Pathfinder and spent the next 5 to 10 years eating Wizards of the Coast lunch. So Wizards, understandably, doesn't want that. So that's part of what this new OGL does, but it also, as Chris said, contains some stuff that is very bad. Well, Chris didn't say that. It does contain some stuff that's bad.
Yeah.
Some stuff that was not well thought out on their part, and some stuff that the community has misunderstood. As I've been listening to some different legal people, and it's a real mixed bag. Wizards is bad in this. They should have done better and made their intents more clear and written their OGL better, and we can get into that. Benito, you're a content creator for D&D. What do you think?
Well, and that's the thing, something that I had to think about is how is this going to affect me? And I don't think it's going to affect me as a content creator because I don't think I necessarily fall into the category of making tons of money. I'm not necessarily taking something that's theirs, bringing it into my own and changing it and putting it out there for anything other than just some enjoyment. I'm not monetized by any means, but being a creator on such a small level that I am, and I think about anybody that's a creator, and especially on the larger level, then for sure I have to be there to support the larger creators, because I actually get a lot of stuff from, the RPG, the drive-through, or Dungeon Masters Guild, or we've started playing Morkborg, and that's all open game license, and you can just do anything you want with that, and they're happy to let you do it. But I get things from those creators too, and so yeah, it's just really supporting the creators who I get things from. I can understand. I can understand how that works. So there's so much time, and anyone else here who's creating things for other people to play, even on a small level. The amount of time and effort it goes into it on the level we do it, and then think about that as your income and how much effort goes into doing that as your business. And so we have to support those people and spread the word of the OGL of how kind of bad it was. It's not. I wasn't complaining because it was going to affect me personally in a monetary way, but it was going to affect the people who were following and getting content from.
Right.
So let's kind of break this up then. Let's first talk about what was wrong, or what people didn't like in this new OGL. Talk about that a little bit, and then we can talk about the fan response.
Okay.
Or the community response.
Yeah.
So, first off, like Chris said, this is a bit longer document, but it kind of needs to be, just because it has more stuff it needs to account for now. So some of the things that the fan community is really upset over, probably the biggest thing is there is a bit of the new OGL that says that Wizards has a perpetual, non-exclusive, forever license to use your content without crediting or paying you. That is a big thing that has a ton of creators worried.
I think that'd worry anybody that creates content.
Right. That's probably what I heard most about, was that part of it.
Right.
And it didn't matter if you were in the non-commercial or the commercial, you still had to register your content with Wizards, and then they have the license, and there's no stopping it.
Right.
So they claim that is to prevent lawsuits if they just happen to print something that's close to yours. So they claim it's just kind of covering their butt, but they should have included kind of different language with that. Because obviously everyone immediately thinks, oh, they just want to use Exandria from Critical Role without paying any royalties or licensing. Would they do that? Probably not, but it's more the fact that they were giving themselves that power and not giving anyone much of a choice in it.
But that, just a question to everyone who, if you happen to chance to see Legal Eagle's review, there seemed to be a lot in the how they wrote everything to give the impression that they had more power than they actually did. If you look at copyright laws and trademark laws, because it seemed to be more of a scare, and they had all the power when in essence maybe they didn't. And a good example is, when you talk about copyright and, oh, you can't use any of it because it's copyrighted, that only applies to how it's created in terms of images, the books, the exact layout of the book, versus if it's a process and a rule, you can't copyright a process or a rule.
Or a game.
Basically Legal Eagle was saying they can't copyright the system mechanics, but they can copyright the very specific creatures that were created for Dungeons and Dragons, the images of those creatures, the words and descriptions around them can be
spells,
copyrighted.
things like that.
Yeah. So that is one thing of how one of the community response things that I'll get back to talking about. The next big thing that they changed that will affect creators is they are instituting, or were instituting, a license structure in there. So basically, if your company made $750,000, you paid Wizards 25% of your income or your revenue over that 750,000. If it's a Kickstarter, you only owe 20% of the total Kickstarter money. So the fan community was really up in arms about that as well, because a lot of Kickstarters will bring in a couple or $1 million or more dollars, and they might have been a small company before that, but that's technically revenue. And if you take 20% of their revenue off the top, that's gonna sink a lot of projects, and even a lot of creators who maybe make $1 million a year. Like, do they make 25%? How much profit do they make, and how many people will that stifle?
Yeah, because
Right.
I heard a lot of people complaining about the margins being really tight in that
that's
industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's that way with any sort of publishing, book publishing.
And their goal, their aim wasn't, I think what they accomplished was pretty poor given how the OGL was written, but their aim was primarily, and they kind of made that clear, that they wanted their piece of the pie from those companies that were making tens of millions of dollars, getting Netflix deals and everything of that nature out of that. And that's not to come to their defense, but they could have structured it in a manner that more specifically targeted those entities. And instead they broke it down into tiers that made it really hard to break out and be accomplished without, having your margins attacked. And you're right, it is very tight. They don't, if you're hitting that area, I mean, they could have just said, hey, if you're making like 5 million maybe or something, because at that point you could almost, I hate to say it, like assume, you're on a trajectory to make money, and that's when they start taking their piece. But instead they structured their tiers. As Seth mentioned earlier, if you made over 750,000, that was the third tier. But there's some things that happen below that too, which is also kind of an annoyance. So the second tier was if you made between 50,000 and 750,000, you had to start reporting on all of your revenues at that point. And if you're below 50,000, they didn't really seem to care about you, and so that whole thing also created a lot more work for those creators as well. As it's almost like they took the stance of being an IRS, right? Mm-hmm. We want to start auditing, and you have to start reporting everything, and then you have to start paying us out for this thing. And as we all know, the IRS isn't very popular right now. So
do you suppose part of that was just so that they could make an accurate determination as to whether somebody was in that $50,000 to $750,000 range?
Probably.
Yeah, but it seems like a whole lot of work for that when they knew who their specific targets were, but then they kind of put out this blanket licensing scheme that impacted everybody and most people in a negative way. Mm-hmm. And so I think I see where they were going, and their targets are clear, but
I'm still confused, so I'm gonna ask some questions. Is this from? So it's role playing, right? The Dungeons and Dragons part.
Yeah.
And then people are selling
content.
Books. Well, you're saying content, but I don't know what that means.
So Bill's running a campaign right now.
What's that?
So Bill's running a campaign right now.
Right.
If the campaign goes really well, we love it. It becomes really popular, or he thinks, you know what, this is good enough to share. He can turn that campaign into a book. He can kickstart it. He can do whatever. Like the campaign, he changes the things that he needs to change, so it's not using the content.
It's a new adventure. Yeah,
and it's a new adventure. It's content for the game. He puts it out for people to purchase, play, whatever. That is what the OGL old and new accomplishes, and gives them a path toward.
Yeah, and game mechanics, I think, is the tie-in there as well. And
the mechanics.
I think that helps to define.
Well, I remember when I was younger, when I was into D&D a little more, we used to play some knockoff games that were like you were a 20s gangster or Star Trek or something like that. I don't know if they're still out there. I know I don't think it was. Would that still apply?
It depends on when they were made.
I mean, so there. I don't. So there is role playing It just strikes me as absurd. So that's.
It strikes a lot of people as absurd.
I don't think it's even.
That's the whole point of it, isn't it?
I mean, that's why we're having a conversation.
There's you can get angry over it, but it just doesn't feel. I don't that you can copyright whatever role playing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I understand.
Or do they own The Hobbit now?
That's the thing, yeah. But role playing can't be copywritten or the act of, role playing a game, an RPG. I think it's when you start stepping on mechanics, creatures,
sure,
things that are already set in stone with Wizards of the Coast, and you're implementing that into your new game. Right. I think
I guess.
they're looking so much at the fact something.
Yeah, for example, an official D&D game, you'll have some Everard's Mage Hand, and in the SRD in your content, you can have a spell Mage Hand, but it can't be Everard's Mage Hand because that is a specific character from Faerun.
Sure.
Okay,
but you can have your own Mage Hand spell that does the exact same thing.
So Benito, you mentioned Morkborg a minute ago. But that's not Wizards of the Coast, but is it using Wizards of the Coast game mechanics or?
It is overall when you think about combat and then you're rolling for checks and things like that. They're just calling it something completely different. The mechanic is the same. You're still rolling dice and you still have ability checks and all the things that go along with it. But I think it's so far away from anything from Wizards of the Coast. I think it's fine. I don't think it is anything that they have to worry about. I think it's when you start to get really close to that line and you're starting to, reference things that are specific to Wizards of the Coast material.
Gotcha.
But that's also one of the things is that the OGL was and is really popular in the community. And even if your work doesn't really have a lot of, or it doesn't need to use the OGL, a lot of creators would put the OGL in their work. It kind of served as a little bit of legal protection from them, from Wizards of the Coast, right, in case they decided that they wanted to sue over it.
Yeah,
and it was kind of a mark among the community that, hey, we're all part of this. We're using the OGL.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is from a system called Fate. I don't think it even uses D20 rolls. It uses a series of D6s. Like, I can't imagine what's in this book that would be licensable under the OGL, but it still contains the OGL. Now, should Wizards have a right to use all of this, including the stuff that's in the Dresden files that was specifically licensed for this role-playing game? That's one of the things that people are like, oh, no, you guys aren't doing this.
Right, well, so something completely out there and completely different may have had a mechanic or a creature or a storyline that Wizards thought was sort of interesting, and they can just sort of, originally they could maybe take that, implement it into theirs, and the fact that you were a part of that OGL sort of gave them a license to do that, right? Is that what you're saying? So, yeah,
and it is an agreement between like them and you. So there is some. You get protections. You get to use the SRD in your content, and then like they also get protections from being like sued by you. So like there was stuff that went both ways.
So that could go all the way back around to what Charles was saying. If you're playing a detective game that's an RPG that has a game mechanic, and there's something about that they may like, and you sign that agreement that says they can take it. If there's something in that detective game which is nothing fantasy related or completely non-fantasy, whatever, if there's something in there they liked, if you're part of that OGL, they could take part of that content and call it their own.
Yeah, and the third really big thing
without splitting the profits.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And the third really big thing that's in the new one that people are talking about is that they retain they are giving themselves the ability to basically cut anyone out of the OGL whenever they feel like it. So basically, to terminate the contract, to terminate that license agreement, and to change it with only 30 days notice. So
if you're producing content and then you end up saying something critical about Wizards of the Coast, for example, they may decide to just shut you off.
Right.
And steal your stuff.
Yeah.
Because under this new contract, it all belongs.
And I mean, they could conceivably have done that to Paizo. It's like, okay, guys. So like there's actually a fourth thing, is that they sent this out to creators with a week's notice to sign. Like they call it a draft, but this was sent out to creators with a contract to sign with a week.
Huh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so they were applying some major pressure there. So all of those things lead to the fan response.
Yes, which I think is really important to talk about, the power of the fans and all of this, and that to make Wizards of the Coast walk it back.
Yeah, and the fan response, I think, from Wizards of the Coast has to be considered almost apocalyptic.
Yeah, I canceled my D&D Beyond, just to make a statement. I don't have anything on there really worth losing, or some people are really into D&D Beyond deep, and I could see where it would be a struggle to make that decision. It was easy for me because I think I had one book and a year's subscription or something. I didn't really have anything on there, so it was easy for me to make that statement.
See, I've got a ton of books on there now. I've been buying a couple books a month for the last several months because I just liked the way D&D Beyond works as a reference document.
Yeah, everything about it's great. I don't fault the app or the system at all, but it's easy for me to make that decision. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes or Bill's shoes or anybody else's shoes who have a lot of content on there.
And so the news hit. And then the creators started speaking out on YouTube, and things started getting distributed on online, and things just caught fire. And it was not helped by Wizards of the Coast effectively going radio silent for 2 entire weeks. Like earlier on this week, they had one single tweet from D&D Beyond that said, "Hey, we've heard you will be making an announcement soon." And then 3 more days passed with no announcement. They had a planned announcement that they then didn't have. And then they Friday, they finally released a statement that is full of lies and downplaying of the community's concerns.
But they haven't changed anything?
Oh, no, they are going to change things.
They said they're going to.
Yeah, they say they're going to. They said they're going to change things. They say the royalties are out. The license back provision where they get to use your content is out. And they gave some explanations for where they were coming from with that.
Okay.
And now here's where I lessen the severity of my position a little bit, in that they are right about some things. The OGL probably does need a new edition. It probably does need to be updated.
It does. It is very outdated. To give a timeline on that, it was almost 20 years old now.
Yeah. Well, it's over 20 years old.
Yeah, it's over 20 years. So they did have some catching up to do, because it was written in a completely different age of content and what gets created out there. So
and they
do
have
their defense, but it was outdated.
A good podcast, if you want to hear a good kind of take on it, is Opening Arguments. They just released an episode on it, and it made me think about the contract in a different way. And some of those things did need to change. Like I can really understand Wizards of the Coast position on wanting to be able to disallow certain people.
Sure.
specifically racist and bigoted content.
Right.
Well, do they?
were-
Is there a process before you can put their label on your stuff?
In the 1.0, there isn't, and this one does establish the process, which is what allows them to terminate the licenses now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So, opening arguments reminded me that not that long ago, someone tried to put out a blatantly racist module or gaming system that used the OGL, and they were trafficking with D&D's official material.
Huh.
Like, it was openly Nazi. Just like Nazis in space, I think, was more or less the campaign setting. And Wizard said, no, you are not doing that.
Not
So that's
not into the OGL. Go do it over here, but get as far away from us as possible.
yeah.
So were they able to stop them?
Yeah, so now they were using the old OGL somehow, but the new OGL basically makes it so that it's far easier for them to do that. Which is
don't even
good
bother
and bad.
trying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're basically giving themselves powers that can be used for good, but can also be used for evil.
I'm curious about, so if you have projects that are coming out that fall under the old OGL, the thing was that's fine, and you can still fall under that for this grace period, and then when the new one picks up, you're going to have to move over to that. I had read or heard something about, for you to be able to do that, though, you were going to have to sign up for the first one to get that grace period or fall under the old OGL for things that are coming out and your Kickstarters.
Yeah,
and
they
things
basically
like
force
that.
you to have to move on.
Yeah, and if you don't sign the new one, then you don't get to your new stuff coming out that falls under the old one doesn't count. And so it's forcing people to sign the new one when it comes out if you want the stuff that's a little bit further behind that to be able to come out. And I don't know if that's still something that's going to happen or not, but I thought that was pretty
It's fairly aggressive.
Yeah, extremely. You're right.
So some of the provisions, there were actual good reasons for them to put them in. And as to Chris's point, like we were talking earlier about the royalties stuff.
Yeah.
I don't actually have a problem with that. They can license it and say, yeah, if you make this much, you owe us this much. I would argue the terms of those, but they had provisions in there for working out specific terms with large groups, who I assume that would be for people like Critical Role or Bill when he takes off.
Well, right, and I don't think it should be put in there as a blanket statement in terms of what royalties should be or anything like that. Like, that might work for somebody who gets a deal with Netflix to do a series based off of something that was born out of, the OGL content or the SRD. So, but that should be negotiated at the time when that happens, not just like everybody's going to owe us this and that.
Exactly. Right.
Situation.
Your content could be so far out there and so far removed from anything of the Wizards of the Coast, but the fact you signed that agreement to protect yourself makes you liable to pay a royalty. But your content may have nothing to do with anything that has to do with Wizards of the Coast. Nothing. You signed it to protect yourself, and then you've signed that, and now you owe them money if you make a certain amount. So there should definitely be tiers and different, thoughts and what the connections are before you have to pay that royalty. A blanket, I agree with Chris. A blanket statement's just not.
It's not
Not good for anybody.
It should just be like, look, if you make over a certain amount, within 6 months or a year, just throwing something out there, you have to sit down with us and come to an agreement once we both have an understanding of what it is and where you're going and what that content is. If it's like, look, I only make, I make 780,000 a year, that's not worth collecting anything on that. Like, you're not, like, you just happen to tip over that point, but you're not making anything. But you're sitting at the table and you're like, yeah, I just signed a contract with Hulu for $20 million over the next 5 years to produce a series based off of this content, which clearly comes out of the, the SRD, then you guys should figure something out.
And like another bit that is bad in there is they force everyone who signs it into forced arbitration rather than being able to go to trial.
Oh,
So while I now think that I'm not, even if Blizzard or Wizard, I'm really having a hard time getting
Say Blizzard.
Wizard and Blizzard, because they're both companies who just rubbed me the wrong way over the past couple months. But so what was I going to say? Oh yeah, even if they had come up with this OGL with only the purest and best of intentions for the community, which I do not believe, because we've heard from a few leakers within the company who have like told us where exactly their CEOs are at. Even if it had been perfect, the way they presented it and the way that they went about communicating with people once it was leaked was atrocious. Like, they should not. They just left a space in which the community could burn for 2 weeks, and that's what it did. Nearly every content creator I follow has released videos against this. So I have seen a whole lot more who've been coming out. People who aren't even in the gaming community are talking about it and how bad it is. And even if it's not all that bad, all of the perception is it being terrible, which has left an opening for Paizo, who I mentioned earlier. The day of that Wizards was supposed to make their announcement about clarifying the OGL, and they skipped it. Paizo released their own announcement that they were releasing their own open resource something or other. I've got that tab up. It is the Open RPG Creative License, also called the ORC or ORC. Which I just, come on.
Yeah, I have to know like how long it took for them to come up with that.
I don't know, but I'm gonna give it to Paizo for the name right there, the orc. Come on.
I like it, I do.
Well, I think didn't they also release very early on too that they were going to release their game mechanic early? Am I thinking maybe of a different company? They were going to release
that's a different company.
Yeah, maybe that was. Maybe that's what
Cobalt Press.
But that leads into the next thing I want to talk about when you're done. So
yeah, so Paizo announces that they're doing their own basically OGL, and it's going to be open, free, and unrestricted forever. Not even held by them, held by an IP or a company that respects open IP, basically.
Well, aren't they already under Wizards OGL?
That's something else they said, is that they're basically said that they would call Wizards bluff and say, no, you can't, you cannot, there's no language in the original OGL that allows you to deauthorize it. Even if you did, we're going to fight you on anything you try to sue us for that uses it, because we think that the system is still fair use. And to the third point, their new Pathfinder 2nd edition was only keeping that OGL in there for other people to be able to use their content. Not because they needed to use Wizards stuff anymore. So Pathfinder 2e is separate enough from the OGL that they're going to re-release it with their new ORC so people can still use their content. And a bunch of other creators have joined on with them and are also going to be contributing to the new ORC. So
yeah, they're going through it with a fine-tooth comb to re-release it and take out anything that even possibly could be speculated as even close to have anything to do, with the Wizard system of anything, any language, anything that they're gonna that they're gonna take the time to go through and just pick it completely apart. So when they do stand on their own,
and also
less for Wizards to say.
With this, other companies can add in their own rule sets so that content creators can make things for their systems, because the OGL caused just like this explosion in the the role-playing community that largely benefited Dungeons and Dragons, and that's why the original lawyers who wrote it say they did it.
Yeah, it
They
makes
say
sense.
that the original OGL achieved its effect.
Yep, 100%.
So now Wizards have bought themselves a world where people are probably going to use the content licensing and system where they don't have to pay 25% if they become big, and that there is no chance of Wizards turning on them and deciding that the agreement needs to change. Because that was the thing with the new OGL, is that they said they could change it at any time. So they say 750,000 is the limit right now, but there's nothing stopping them from taking that down to 50,000.
Sure. Well, what about content that's already out there that continues to sell?
So that is another one of the things that people were mad about with them deauthorizing the old 1.0, is because then what happens to that other content?
Right.
Do you sign, or can you not sell it anymore? And the assumption is that you wouldn't be able to sell it anymore unless you sign the new one.
The new one, right?
So,
but everything that I've seen and everything that I've followed up on says they just can't do that. Now, whether they can or can't, I don't know. But everything I keep reading, I don't know if everybody's on the same bandwagon of legally they can't do that. That's all I hear. I don't hear that legally they can. I just keep hearing people fighting for the fact that no, they can't do that, and it's not.
Yeah. We've listened to a couple different lawyers give their takes on that, and I guess we won't actually know unless it goes to court.
Right.
Yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
just has kind of their legal opinion on it and whatnot. So
what does everybody think? Do you think you're going to see a mass exodus of people that are currently writing content for D&D over to Paizo?
We're already seeing that. Like a lot of the big names who do make and put out third-party content, Cobalt Press. Let's see, they had a list of people who'd already signed on with them. Cobalt Press, Green Ronin, Legendary Games, Roll for Combat, Roll Genius Games, and I've heard from lots of others. They're all going to be moving away from making content for 5th edition and not for 1 D&D.
What do you think will be the long-term impact for 1 D&D then?
They're going to see a major, so this is exactly what happened with 4th edition. The 4th edition rules weren't great. It was a boring system to play in. Not many people liked it. And when they released it, they also tried to institute a new game license system or something. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was a different form of the OGL, and it was much more restrictive to content creators. Well, the content creators, led by Paizo, it kind of fractured the community. Paizo created Pathfinder to continue kind of the D&D 3.5 style of gaming, and a lot of other people left to make their own things. And especially in the last decade, we've seen an explosion of systems. Many of them reference the OGL, but a lot of them are their own unique things.
Okay.
So, do we think if Wizards of the Coast either walks back everything, does no changes, which is doubtful, or as you mentioned, comes out with a version that kind of rights the wrongs, if you will, and they get their fair share in royalties based off of something that seems fair. They no longer, have this stigma about content creators and owning their property. Let's say they fix that, right, and manage to put in language that's fair, and they get the royalties based off of what they probably should. Do they come back from this? Do they, or do we live in a world of just more competition in the future?
I think we just live in a world where Sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead.
I think we just live in a world where there's more competition in the future. I think D&D is going to get knocked off its king's spot, possibly to be replaced by Pathfinder again. Second E, I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but because of the announcement, I went ahead and bought the core rule book, so I'm going to be finding out how Pathfinder 2E works. I think that, unless Wizards has to do something to regain community trust, or people will go to different things, and that's going to be really bad because they were really counting on D&D Beyond being the big thing that took their company into the next.
So before the OGL, then go ahead, Jenna.
I was just going to say, I think Benito and I talked about this with another player last night, that
I was going to bring it up. That's
the people who are already in the community they understand the issues, and they maybe walk, but with shows like Stranger Things making suddenly this new wave of popularity among D&D, I think you're going to get a lot of new players who don't care and they don't understand it and they just want to play and they don't see a problem with everything.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. But from another perspective, consider how Wizards has been for the last couple book releases. Their last several official releases have been kind of substandard. So what do players do when they've played through all the existing D&D modules that are officially released?
So, and the only argument I have, what Jen is saying is 100% right when you think about people on the outside who want to play. It's Dungeons and Dragons. That's just what you call it. People on the outside don't say I want to play an RPG. People say I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. So, that's always been the people. They know that's where they want. They know that's what they want to play, just based on words, and they play that, and that's where they go to do it. So I think where the problem comes in, though, is and where Wizards falls is because of the dungeon masters and the people who who set up these games for those people, and those people come to them and say, hey, I want to play Dungeons and Dragons, I've heard so much about it, and the dungeon masters or whoever's setting up the games, the GMs, say it's okay, but this is what we're doing now, or this is the system that we're playing now. You're going to get the same experience. It's going to be super fun, but it's not Dungeons and Dragons. You're still going to role play. You're still going to do this and this and that. So I think that's where Wizards falls, is because of the people who run the games. This whole thing is affecting us. And then that bleeds out to the people who are already playing or the people who want to play. And so I think that's where Wizards shot themselves in the foot, is with the people who run the games. And it's just not a good deal. And then I'm doing it now. I've been doing it for a little while now that I've been on a DM break, is going out there and exploring new systems. When I took my break, I honestly thought I was going to be more focused on Wizards and the content and the stuff from that. And then it turns out I started to discover all these different games and all these different rule sets and all these different mechanics, and I'm bringing all those into the game that I'm doing now or that I'm going to come back to do. And so I think that's where it falls apart, is with the people who run the games. I think that's where it's going to spread out from.
And I mean, D&D or Wizards owes a lot of Dungeons and Dragons success to good content creators that have come out in the past decade. Critical Role. How many people come to Dungeons and Dragons specifically because they see it played on Critical Role? What happens if the next big Critical Role is Pathfinder, which Critical Role started off playing in Pathfinder?
They started out as Pathfinder, right? You're right.
I mean, there will be another big Critical Role at some point, and they'll bring people to
Wizards of the Coast's point of why they're trying to redo the OGL, because they can't collect on any of that today.
But I mean, they are getting significant value already out of that.
Yes, but they're not getting, the big deals. They don't get any cut of that. So yes, I mean, they're a household name and they're driven up because of that. But to their point, one of the key things of collecting that royalties is because some of them are making big money.
And that is the deal that Wizards made.
That's how it was born out of.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. They wanted more people playing, because more people playing meant more people buying their books.
Hey, they got greedy.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, and back around. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's going to hurt them the most, is that the next big thing isn't going to be, say, D&D. They're going to say Pathfinder or a different system. It might not be as recognizable, but it not only protects their finances, but maybe it's just a better system, and people have been trying more out. Like a lot of the shows I listen to, they revolve through a few different systems just to see how they work.
Well, and how many times has the word Pathfinder been said now in the last 2 weeks where it was probably not mentioned nearly as often? So now it's, a lot of people are going to start looking at that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's exactly what happened with 4th edition.
So here, this kind of goes back to what Bill was saying. So they're about to, D&D Beyond is going to launch their new system and the whole new app and everything that's awesome going to be with that. And one D&D, it's still probably going to happen, but I don't think on nearly the level that it was going to. I think they expected a flood of people to come in,
right?
All that up, and maybe it still will. Maybe this will eventually blow away and we'll forget about it. But I think they've got to be a little worried about. They were announcing the big launch of all the fun, cool stuff with D&D Beyond, and I don't know. It doesn't have the fire it did. I don't think.
Well, I mean, Wizards has been. This isn't the first major flub that Wizards has done in the last couple months. They had the big their idea for the big 30th anniversary of Magic. Their big idea, the thing that fans were gonna love and they were doing for the fans, is they released a series of blind boosters for $1,000. Well, $999.
Yeah.
Like 4 of these boosters that had reprints of beta edition Magic cards that were proxies. You couldn't even play with them. $1,000.
Jesus.
Yeah, that set the entire Magic community on its ear for a while.
Yeah.
So like Hasbro, the parent company of Wizards of the Coast, is turning the screws, and they want
more money.
Wizards to be more profitable because the rest of their stuff is sucking.
And it's not that Hasbro was lighting the world on fire. Their stock prices were not great. I think the flagship, the only not keeping them afloat, but probably mostly keeping them afloat, their lifeboat was Dungeons and Dragons with Wizards and whatnot. And when you're not making as much profit as you should be, and you look at the one thing that's exactly what they did. What's that thing is they just went after their lifeboat and just tried to figure out how to milk it dry and didn't think about how big the community was.
Yeah, the CEO of Wizards was quoted as saying that D&D was under monetized, and they wanted to see the sorts of profits that the video games were making with loot boxes and that sort of thing.
Yep. I know what we need now. We need a D&D movie.
Yeah. And they do this a couple months before their big movie drops.
Yeah.
And before their next system drops.
And as much as I could not wait to go see that movie, I'm not going to not see it out of protest. I have such a kind of taste in my mouth that I'm just like, I'm not even as excited as
I was looking forward to it. Yeah, now it's kind of
just such turds about it. Now I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe I'll just wait till it comes on TV.
I mean,
or streams or whatever.
I'm kind of waiting on Wizards' next move. Like, I'm trying not to get as caught up as I did in the religious zeal. So if they like show that they're going to work out a good OGL that gives them the protections they need while also giving the community the protection and support they need, I will come back. I like D&D. I like D&D 5th Ed. I think it's just a good system. I have a lot of fun playing it, and I had a lot of fun running it when I did the one shot. So I still am interested in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I will not, I'm not going to support them during this whole thing, and I'll start looking around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not maybe I move to Pathfinder 2e. I don't know. They've lost a lot.
When they come out with this, it has to be so good, and everybody knows that content creators on YouTube are just going to talk about whatever that suits their viewership and get some more numbers. But this new OGL is going to have to be so good that the YouTube channels are going to have to really glom onto it and do what they're doing now, talking bad about it. They're going to have to do to talk good about it, and then to get that rolling again. Yeah. And it's going to have to be really, really, really good. Otherwise, it's going to be the same old, they revised it, but it's still shitty. It's just going to be really good.
If they want content creators to come back, like the writing supplements for it, they're going to have, those content creators have to know that Blizzard or Wizard isn't going to try and change the terms of the contract on them again and attempt to steal their livelihood. If you're writing stuff, are you going to write it for the system that you're not sure is going to change in the next 6 months? Or are you going to write it for the thing that you've got a binding legal agreement that says you can keep making stuff for this for all time?
Right. It's like, how many times do you touch a hot stove? You do it once. Screw me over one time, I'm not that likely to come back. And they didn't put it in. They didn't put it into place and really screw people over, but they showed their hand enough for people.
They were trying. They did send out that OGL 1.1 with contract and non-disclosure agreement to several creators. We've only heard a brief statement from Critical Role that was really non-committal and didn't actually address anything.
It didn't. It was so bad.
I'm pretty sure that that's because they are well and truly entangled with Wizards of the Coast at this point, at least as far as some of the books they've released and some of their content. And they probably were one of the groups that would have gotten a special licensing agreement.
Oh, 100%. And if they back this thing, the book deals that they can get, the kinds of contract that they're going to get, if they would step, and push this thing forward and be behind it. I can't imagine what they're throwing at those guys.
But, Dimension 20 has also remained silent on this, and I'm pretty certain that Brennan Lee Mulligan, the showrunner, would be dead set against this agreement. So I'm pretty sure that people are staying silent on it, mostly for legal reasons and to protect the jobs of all the different people who are with them. So, like I said earlier, even if Wizards' intentions behind this were 100% above the board, 100% pro community, and we're not looking out for ourselves, then they still really botched this the whole way through.
All right. All right. Well, we're coming up on an hour here, so good discussion, everybody. Benito, thanks for joining us for this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was fun to talk about, but not really.
Right. Always good to have you on the show, and
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll look forward to having you back again soon. So, anyway, thanks everybody for listening. We hope you'll dive in and check into what's going on with the OGL and the license changes, and
let us know what you think
in the comments. If there's something else you want us to comment on or something we missed, let us know, and we will talk about it in a future episode. Take care, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.